The villain edit of Daya Betty is a well-constructed narrative designed to entice you, entertain you, and draw you into a series of twists and turns where anger, betrayal, and jealousy are front and center, and it does so for your entertainment. But it's ultimately only just a narrative designed to take advantage of real events, distort them, exaggerate them, in order to magnify your emotional investment and make sure that you will tune in next week to see how it all turns out. So how did they manage to pull it off? How much of what we saw was actually real? Did the producers interfere? And if so, what did they do exactly? And ultimately, is she really a villain? Or is she going to emerge on the other side a redeemed hero? Welcome to The Chop, and in this special episode we are going to dissect the villain edit of Daya Betty. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, because here on YouTube we depend on the algorithm to suggest our videos, so don't forget to feed it some good comments and upvotes. Thank you so much for your support. So far we have seen many examples of Daya Betty's cutthroat approach to the Drag Race experience, from the Gold Star incident, to her attitude toward Orion, to the gratuitous shitting on Jasmine, to straight out lying about being pissed for just being safe, and even telling Willow what she can and can't do for her runway. There are so many examples that it's impossible to deny that her ego played a big part in those events. And personally I'm not going to deny that, because facts are facts. You don't adjust facts to meet your beliefs, you change your beliefs according to facts. However, in my opinion, these facts are not the whole story, just a part of it. So, what are we missing? Well, in order to find out, let's take a step back and start from the beginning. During the Untucked for episode 5, we got our first appetizers of Daya Betty's villain edit. In there, she had some problems admitting that she was pissed because she was just safe. And there is no going around it. There's no editing magic involved into this. Even though she tried to hide behind the excuse of wanting feedback from the judges, her own words are the ones who betray her, both in the workroom and in the confessionals. And to make everything worse, we even caught her multiple times shitting on Jasmine for no apparent reason. And so we leave Untucked with the feeling that the situation is very clear. She's pissed to be safe and she lies about it. Period. Now, as a viewer, I'm totally on board. I am actually entertained. But as a reviewer, I'm not exactly convinced, because everything seems a little bit too easy, too perfect, even too convenient. So we move on to episode 6. The queens are back in the workroom and it's time to introduce Daya Betty's storyline and start performing some good old character assassination. After being called out, Daya Betty tries to deny the obvious once again. Meanwhile, Deja and Camden are bitch-facing, meaning that they don't really believe her.
Daya, you're a little bit disappointed with being safe.
I wasn't disappointed. I just genuinely wanted to know what I can do better, because I watched the only 2 girls left in my group be in the top, and I felt like I did pretty strong in the challenge, so I just wanted to know what could have elevated me to that next spot.
And at the end of this, we also have a confessional from Jasmine, locking the narrative into place.
I will agree with Deja. Daya is really, really bitter. You could switch her name from Daya Betty to Bitter Betty.
I mean, it seems simple enough, doesn't it? However, based on what we see later in this episode, I'm starting to think that there was some actually truth to Daya Betty's words. She really wants the feedback from the judges. She wants it so bad that later on she's going to ask RuPaul and Carlson directly. She's also going to confirm that she is actually tired of being safe, meaning that she's using the judges' feedback as a kind of plausible deniability. Maybe because otherwise she would look just like Jasmine, the person everybody made fun of. Even she made fun of her, before finding herself in the same situation, that is. In all of this, the edit kind of makes sure that we never even consider the possibility that part of her frustration really comes from the fact that she doesn't know what else to do in order to stand out, or that her lie might be motivated by shame rather than malice, because that would humanize her a little bit too much. And you cannot humanize a villain. That's not how you create a character. So she is lying because she is bitter. Period. End of the story. It's 5 minutes in, and we already established the narrative. Daya Betty is bitter, and she is a liar. Later on, Daya and Willow's narrative will interlock. Not to add more peaks and valleys to her character, we actually want to avoid that. She is a villain after all, and the only thing allowed is to exaggerate her character in a negative way. How can we do that? Well, with a little bit of editing magic, and maybe a nice word during filming. So, let's start from the end. Because much like Michelle, I like to be cryptic. No, I'm just kidding. We start from the end because it's much easier to explain it like this. Now, Daya made the mistake of confronting Willow about who has the right to portray a baby character for the runway. As if there was, kind of a rule that everyone should have a unique concept or character, like in Snatch Game, for example. Why would she believe that in the first place? Well, we don't really know. But I find it curious, because similar concepts, similar silhouettes, or similar use of materials have never really been a problem for sewing challenges. So it feels kind of strange already. Maybe it could be that she is just an insecure asshole, and she's trying to avoid any direct comparison in a desperate attempt to stand out. Or it could be that someone told her that every queen should have a different concept. Again, we have no way to know. But the interesting part happens before this. We see a long segment of Willow struggling with opening the boxes, and we actually spend quite a lot of time feeling sorry for her. We see her struggling, we see confessionals, we see her walking around, but most of all, we see that nobody is helping her. And now more than ever, we feel the absence of Cornbread. But Cornbread is not here, and Willow is left alone, with no choice but to settle for everyone's scraps. And these feelings that you're feeling right now are going to be extremely useful in magnifying the impact of her interaction with Daya Betty, the one that happens later on. The more we feel sorry for Willow right now, the more we'll react negatively to Daya Betty later on. If you have any doubts that this is exactly what's happening, well, try to imagine this scenario. What if instead of having difficulties, Willow just ordered half of the boxes for herself, and refused to let anyone have them, even queens that actually were struggling? Then by the moment we see Daya having a discussion with her later on, we would all be thinking, well, Willow, that's kind of what you deserve for being so selfish. So you see, the two narratives are interlocked, and the emotions that we feel before will inevitably influence the way we interpret what happens later on. I hope that you see now how very convenient it was to see Willow struggle so much, only to end up being mistreated by Daya Betty. The problem is, this narrative is a little bit too convenient. The two events work together a little bit too well in the way they impact the viewers, and that makes me incredibly suspicious. For example, why didn't anybody help Willow? Did production really decide to sit this one out and watch her struggling without doing anything? Why would they do that? Did all the queens really turn a blind eye to her struggles, even after she clearly asked for help?
Okay, I'm gonna need some stuff from somebody, because I can't open a single fucking box.
No. Personally, I'm not buying any of that. So, what really happened during filming? Well, for me, after the initial struggle, Willow asked for help and someone actually helped. Maybe production brought her a pair of scissors, or maybe a queen opened the boxes for her, or maybe a little bit of both. Then later on, either someone told Daya Betty that every queen should have a unique concept, or she was just being an insecure asshole all on her own. Either way, she will confront Willow. And finally, during editing, any reference to anyone helping Willow will be conveniently removed in order to maximize the emotional impact of Willow's helplessness and feed into Daya's villain edit. And to put the cherry on top, Jasmine will lock the narrative into place once more, through a confessional that's conveniently placed at the end of their interaction.
I'm just letting you know that baby doll idea, I'm claiming it now.
Daya is so hungry for a win, I think she would literally eat a human.
If you show up in a baby doll dress, bitch.
I'm not gonna show up in a baby doll dress.
I'll come for you. All right, good talk.
If you haven't noticed yet, Jasmine is the narrator of Daya's storyline. So, now that you have seen all of this, I also want to add that Daya Betty is not exactly a complete victim in here. Keep in mind that the villain narrative only works because she decided to tell Willow that she had to change her idea. At the end of the day, editing and story producing cannot really force a queen to act a certain way. Producers can ask, yes, that's for sure, they can give suggestions, they can even do things to gently push you to do certain things. But at the end of the day, in good or bad, you are the one in charge of your own actions. And that's why producers always tend to exploit what's already there in the first place, and then exaggerate it or take it out of context in order to dramatize situations and maximize the viewer's engagement. Daya has a big ego, and Daya is also insecure. And that's what's being exploited in here. So, by the end of this scene, we learned that Daya Betty not only is bitter and a liar, like we learned, at the beginning of the episode, she's also a bully to Willow. In the next scene, we see a confessional of Daya Betty confirming that she's tired of being safe, just for good measure.
I am tired of being safe. I want to be noticed. I want people to remember who Daya is.
Then Maddie explains her concept for the runway. Please notice that we don't see Daya's reaction in the workroom. We don't see how she actually responds to Maddie. Instead, what we get served is a confessional from Daya cringing. No words, no explanation, nothing.
I really just want to have like a coordinated outfit with like the little like blow-up doll or something. Maybe just like matching colorful like dress or something.
That confessional could have really come from anywhere, but we, the viewers, are left with the idea that she didn't care enough to give Maddie any sort of feedback. She doesn't like the concept, she doesn't think it's working out, but she's not going to say anything. And by the end of this scene, we learn that Daya Betty is not only bitter, a liar, and a bullied Willow, she's also a shitty friend. Next up, RuPaul is telling the audience that Jorgeous was born to do drag, that she's a child prodigy, and that her lip sync was glorious. Meanwhile, we see a confessional from Daya Betty shitting on Jorgeous. The tone doesn't seem particularly pointed to me, but unfortunately we don't see her laughing at the end of the confessional.
Thank God she has a tiny body and she doesn't have to worry that much about covering a lot of surface area. Thank you.
With her intention left unclear, and a strong negative bias being fostered since the beginning of the episode, viewers are almost guaranteed to leave with the impression that she was really shitting on Jorgeous. So by the end of this segment, we find out that Daya Betty not only is bitter, a liar, a bullied Willow, and a shitty friend, she's also jealous of Jorgeous. And if you think that's a lot, well, think again, because next we're going to add the fact that she is also a bad Crystal Impersonator. So it's Daya's turn to have a talk with Ru and Carlson. She asks them for feedback, and immediately the upbeat background music stops, we hear sound effects playing in the background, and we get reaction shots from Jorgeous and Jasmine. The idea conveyed by the edit is that Daya Betty is doing something that she's not supposed to be doing, that she is kind of stepping out of line.
I haven't really gotten any critiques, so is there anything that you want to see particularly more from me?
And we, the audience, don't really have time to process the real importance of this moment. Daya was not lying in Untucked and in the beginning of the episode. She really wanted their feedback. She wants it so bad that she's asking directly the moment she has a chance to do so. But instead of a proper feedback, she gets something even better, a storyline, and a trigger for later on. She's told she looks too much like Crystal, something that we heard once before already, if you remember, during the critiques for the second premiere.
You are in the Crystal Method family. I could see it in your face.
What I was getting was Crystal Method, so it felt like a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy.
The same critiques where a visibly disinvested Alicia Keys was somehow allowed by the editors to appear in the final cut, calling the queen who was going to be sent home an underdog and someone that could come out and show everybody.
There's all this room for her to grow, so she could be that underdog that comes out and just shows everybody.
Meanwhile, we, the audience, are shown 3 different examples of Daya Betty painting just like Crystal, which means someone in the production room decided that we needed some proof to be convinced of this narrative. And of course, to set this storyline into place, guess who comes to confirm it during a confessional?
Daya asked the question and she got the answer she did not want.
All right, thanks, Daya Betty. Thank you guys so much, I appreciate it.
And like, to be completely honest, I don't know if this outfit is gonna let her grow out of this crystal shadow.
And these, for me, are the main reasons why so much effort was put into Daya's villain edit in the first place. Because maybe, just maybe, she's not a villain at all. Twists and turns, remember? Maybe she's going to be a redeemed villain. Someone whose frustration stemmed from hiding behind the shadow of Crystal, from being unable to be herself, to love herself. Something I'm quite sure is going to change thanks to the help of Mamoru and the show. And honestly, as much as I cringe at the idea of the show licking its own butthole like this, that's what I wish for her, because nobody really deserves the fandom overreaction that comes from a full-on villain edit. That's because to this day, people still are unable to make a difference between the character on television and the real person in real life. I don't know, if you need an example, I can tell you the way I relate to this. I don't enjoy Daya Betty on screen, I'm not shy about it, but that won't prevent me to give the benefit of the doubt to the person outside of the show, where she actually has some control over the way she comes off, over the things she said, and the context in which she says all of these things. Because Drag Race is not a normal environment, it's an extreme one, and that influences the way you behave, not to mention the way you get edited after that. Now, before the episode is over, we still have one more chance to be convinced that Daya Betty is an outright villain. So if a twist will happen later on, we won't see it coming. Jasmine asks her if she got the critique that she was looking for, and Daya is annoyed to be constantly compared to Crystal, as if she's only a bad imitation of her drag mother. In the workroom, she genuinely seemed very discouraged, not angry. She looks kind of defeated in a way.
I always get compared to Crystal, like, non-stop. I am very different than her.
However, instead of what happens in the workroom, we are shown a couple of mismatched confessional where a much more confrontational Daya tries to explain the difference between her and Crystal.
I'm not a carbon copy of Crystal. At the end of the day, Crystal is more playful, fun, Daya is more dark.
Then, in an effort to distance her outfit from Crystal's style, Daya explained that she's going to keep her idea for the outfit, but she's going to try to distress it a little bit more, to make it more close to her own style. At this point, Carrie pokes her by asking if Daya is a distressed Crystal. And this for me is where the narrative finally collapses, because instead of taking the bait, Daya actually tries to explain herself. And in doing so, she looks incredibly defeated, as if she feels cornered, helpless.
I'm not a distressed Crystal. No, but I always have more edge than Crystal does. Crystal's more of a clown than I am.
It lasts only a moment, because a fraction of a second later, she is confrontational again for whatever reason.
And I didn't know Crystal owns color.
And finally, a confessional from Carrie ties the narrative together by saying that her anger comes from a place of desperation. And I agree with Carrie, but I bet that when you first watched the episode, your attention was somehow more focused on the word anger rather than the word desperation. And I hope that by now you do understand that that didn't happen by chance. So, why is being compared to Crystal so triggering for Daya Betty? Why does it make her helpless and desperate? Well, that's a good question, and to answer that, maybe it's time that we get a good idea of who Daya Betty really is. These are some of her looks until the end of 2020, before auditioning for Drag Race. After that, her style seems to have substantially changed, becoming more similar to Crystal, which is kind of the exact opposite of what normally happens in drag families. Queens first learn to paint in the style of their drag mother, and then their makeup slowly evolves into their own style. Quite curious that we see the exact opposite happening in here. So I'm going to ask you a question. Does she look like Crystal to you in these pictures? To me, she looks exactly the way she is describing herself in the workroom. Almost as if someone told her to bring a softer edge to her style, something more similar to her drag mother, something more similar to Crystal. I mean, sure, this is Drag Race, not Dragula, and maybe this was her own decision. But for a moment, let's assume that this is exactly what happened, that she changed her style for Drag Race, only to find out that she was actually set up by the casting producers. And you know, once you pack your bags and your outfits, there's really no going back for a change of wardrobe. So how would that make you feel if your feedback is that you look too much like Crystal? And to partially confirm that, we already know that there's a strong possibility that Daya is one of those queens who does what the producers tell her to do. Don't forget the Gold Star storyline. We dissected that during episode 2 of The Chop, and by the end of it, we came to the conclusion that either Daya and Lady Camden were instructed by producers, or they acted on their own to gain camera time. And at the time, I thought that maybe they acted on their own. However, now that we are on episode 6, I'm way more keen to think that they are both, in a way, production puppets. Except, one is being rewarded for it, while the other was taken for a wild ride. And she cannot even speak about it. Of course, by the end of the critiques, Daya will be placed safe, because at this point, we all kind of understand what's going on here. Jasmine is in the bottom, because if she was upset about being safe during a suing challenge, this time she's going to really get an aneurysm. However, despite these placements, someone else will be the one to confront Jasmine in Untucked. Now, whatever happens from this point on, please remember, there is nothing wrong in enjoying a TV show, or even hating a TV character, as long as you always remember that there is a difference between the character on television and the real person outside of it. I hope this review gave you a much larger picture of what's going on, and maybe even learn a thing or two about what goes into producing reality television. Thank you so much for watching, and if you think this kind of content is worth your money, you can support our work on Patreon by following the link in the video description. And a shout out to Molly Thorne, who just joined our Patreon this week. Thank you so much for your support. The complete review for episode 6 will be out a little later than usual, but hopefully very soon. In the meantime, stay safe and have a great week.